doesn't go away. So, or a particular diagnosis that scares you to death. So imagine, like in 2017, because of family-related conditions, so I had my ultrasound. In one of my ultrasound reports, a white spot in my liver. I said, okay, because I have to deal with this, because I am going to undergo the test, wait for the results. It's about a 3-week wait period. So in the 3 weeks, I have to do something productive to help manage my stress. Because for the first time in my life, I have to undergo a tumor marker test. So I thought that one solution is to do yoga. And yoga that's not expensive. And yoga that, well, unfortunately, has to be in a private space. So I actually went to this yoga studio that has a fitness, it's part of a fitness group. And I was asking about their gender diversity and inclusion policies because I'm a transgender woman. So unfortunately, the person
Share mo nga
who
yung
the
live ko
customer
sa YouTube
service
sa
person who
social justice.
entertained my questions is not trained to understand transgender
Hindi mo post YouTube.
needs, right? And so I heard statements that is very exclusionary. And what she doesn't know is I am waiting for a 3-week period, for the results of my test. And I want to put my mind at ease. But then, I don't want to add her to my stressors. Because the answer there is she didn't undergo, that kind of extensive training that will make her sensitized to the needs of diversity, right, and inclusion. Okay, not that I'm excusing her, but that I cannot add her to my stressors. So I decided to go away and to other yoga studios, and that worked. So I did yoga for 3 weeks, and in the 3-week period, what it was doing was it was grounding my mind. Because when you do yoga, you're actually focused on doing a certain move that you can. Another thing that yoga teaches you is that you're not supposed to envy or be insecure with the other yogis there. So if there is a 20-year-old yogi who's size 0, super petite, right, and can do those gymnastic moves, this is not a gymnastics class, and you're not competing for the Olympics. You are learning yoga, and I am doing yoga to ground my mind.
Right.
Because it's hyperactive and being so afraid of the results of the tumor marker test. So then, after ruling that out, because I keep you doing yoga for the 3 weeks, it has helped me. That's why I was able to wait for the 3-week period. Unfortunately, the test turned out negative. So that's something to celebrate already, that you're grateful for life, that life can continue. But it's also a lesson for me to appreciate life. Because there are things I can control and things that I cannot control. That things like asthma, diabetes, they can be managed, they can be controlled. But when they happen, it's there already. Right? We can live with that. COVID is there. We cannot take it out on our own, right? You can spray everyone with sanitizer and COVID's not gonna go away. But you can manage your own stress surrounding COVID and live in this new world, right? Where with this, yeah, and who knows? Our hope is that COVID will not be virulent very soon. It's just going to be like one of those flus, right? Yeah. Yeah, yes. So, yes. Social political. Oh yeah. So that's why I have to open because my session with a social political play, because I feel that there is a responsibility for us to educate our fellows also. But we are getting stressed by these events too, right? Hey. Are you listening? Yeah. I hate to, I have to tell you the truth that ever since Duterte became president of the Philippines, his presidency caused a division among the Filipinos. He is so divisive. You have to realize that. And so therefore, what we do is we have to find ways towards healing and unification. And this means that some of you will fall in the trappings of being so political yourselves. But it's not about being political, it's being responsible. So if I choose to vote for Lenny for 2022, I'm doing that because I don't have any political leanings towards Lenny. In fact, all of those dynasties must end. The Duterte dynasty, the Marcos dynasty, the Aquino dynasty, the Arroyo, etc. All of those dynasties must end. You have to realize that our people needs healing. They don't need traditional politicians, right? So if you try to ground your thinking, why are you so loyal to Duterte? You keep calling him Tatay Digong. He's not your father. And he is misogynistic against women. How many times do you have to look at, resources for you to realize that he does not respect women, right? So I'm sorry. And then also the Marcoses, right? They want to get back in power. That is very obvious, right? So that's already causing us stress. And then so how do we handle socio-political stressors? Well, we have to think. We have to think. What are the roles that we play here? One role is voting. That's all, right? But then your vote has to be done correctly. It has to be done wisely. So your road toward a wise action of voting, that is important. And it doesn't matter if you are not a lawyer, a doctor, you don't have PhD, because even a farmer who didn't have elementary school education can still vote wisely. But we have to help them understand how to vote wisely. And actually what I'm doing right now is a reminder to everyone that our political loyalism, loving your Digongs or loving your Marcoses will not solve your problems. It will not remove your cancers. And the social cancers, right? Instead, we look for actual solutions. Very exact solutions. And one solution for me is to look at the track records of the candidates. Right. Okay. Okay. So, because there are stressors, what should be the action towards stress? Coping, right? And the thing is, we cope differently. Coping means the ways in which we respond to or manage stress or uncomfortable emotions. Like, for example, a cancer diagnosis. The ways in which we respond to life's demands, right? So maybe we have to ask ourselves, how is our coping skills? One way that Filipinos cope is by talking in groups, right? Because we look at our friends. And that's a great thing because it reminds us that we are social beings. But we should also be reminded that our friends should not decide for us.
Yes.
Yeah. And we should not decide for them. We don't tell them what to do. They should not tell us also what to do. But they should remind us of things. They would be able to remind us of things that we are forgetting. Right? Like for example, you may be forgetting to be objective about your situation. Right? Yes. Examples. Coping is coping always positive? Okay. I gave that example already. Consequences of not coping effectively. Avoidance of underlying concerns. Okay, let me stop there for a while. What's an avoidance of an underlying concern? For example, you cannot deny the diagnosis, right? Or even if, hopefully, the diagnosis is negative, you cannot deny that there are symptoms. So avoiding them totally, there is also that culture in the Philippines, especially from the older generation, that wala yan.
Yes.
Wala lang yan. Ano lang yan, mawawala yan. That will go away eventually. That's nothing. That's what our parents or grandparents always say. In fact, looking back at how my mother deals with this, it's because I come from a very poor background also. So there were times when I was in elementary, because I was a scholar all throughout, so that's why I was able to go to private schools because scholarship, but we couldn't afford it. So there are times that my mother is experiencing pain. I just learned many years later on that my mother had gallstones. And she didn't have her gallbladder removed, or the gallstones were not managed. But I don't know how resilient she is. She must be resilient because she was able to reach 85. When my mother died, she was 85 with the gallstones and all that. And the thing is, she doesn't like going to the doctor for the first reason of the expenses. Because it's unfortunate in our country, we don't have a medical system.
Yes. That time is so expensive.
Right? And that goes back to the social political stress. you, you see, this is something. Yeah. So it's not like the, let's say, I mean, that like the NHS. You're from the UK, Phoebe, right? Yeah. So the NHS in the UK is at least a way better system because if you have that in your country, then if not 100%, a great deal of your expenses, medical expenses, can be shouldered. Because in the Philippines, a greater number of our country people fall beneath the poverty line, right? So that's not fair. That people are still, you are here. That's why we are here. We're working as overseas workers. And like one migrant worker doesn't take care of a nuclear family. She takes care of the extended families.
Definitely.
So if you have a potential cancer scare, that already adds to your stress. But then your family has to be taken care of because there is this social political reality that we are not correcting. You know, like for example, we have families that within our families there are members in our families that don't want to work because we raised them that way or they were raised that way, being dependent, codependent, right? So slackers, unfortunately. That aspect of the culture is there. The part of that culture in the men, for example, when they make a little bit of money, they spend all of that to drink.
Yes.
The bottle of beers, the smoke, and the pollutant, all of the cost of that could have already been saved. Right? Why not do that once or twice a year and then save for the rest of the year? Because that's the least that you can do. Right? I have a cousin who was a helper for about 15 years here, and then the last person that she worked for fell in love with her. But because he was a new divorcee, and I think they were having some papers related issues, and there's no divorce in the Philippines. I'm sorry, I have to thread that path again because our fellow Filipinos do not understand that divorce is a legal process. We actually need it.
Yes.
We need it. It's not about religion.
Yes.
You can worship God, you can believe in Him, you can love Him, but we need a legal process. The right legal process. So that's why a lot of women in the Philippines are suffering psychological, social, and sexual abuse.
Social sec.
Because we don't have such a process. And
And the annulment is for the...
It's very expensive.
annulment is expensive, it's a
Yeah.
long process, and it's also stressing.
9 years. I did that, 9 years.
Imagine, right? Yeah, we understand because one of the things I was doing in the Philippines was we were doing psychological incapacity reports. And this is very tiring and it's very sad, because we simply need a law such as divorce,
Yes.
right? Because some marriages are not working.
Yes.
And then, apart from that, you have, let's say, a family member who will depend on their relative who is working in Hong Kong or Singapore or the Middle East, working her ass off, earning $4,600 Hong Kong dollars, right? And then most of that money goes to everyone back home because it's done out of love. But maybe it's not just out of love, it's being forced to that kind of responsibility that you may not really want to assume. Now, how do you take care of yourself? You want someone else to take care of you, right? So we also have to position our minds in such a way that we can take care of ourselves. We have to start thinking about the social realities that we live in. Diba? There are so many things for us to change in our culture, right? And we will realize that if we don't do things now, this isn't going to be a cycle, right? Yeah. It's also like what I always hear. It's like what I always hear.
We are in live.
Hello there. It's like what I always hear from relatives back home when I was still a kid. Walang mangyayari sa'yo pag babakla-bakla ka. You know? Nothing will happen to you if you remain like that. If you try to become trans, you know, you will not get anywhere. I just could not tell my relatives to their faces. But the reason why I'm here is because I'm trans. I finished my PhD because my study was about trans. I was able to go to different countries for free because of activism, because of transness. Because I was talking about being transgender. I was invited for those opportunities. So, nakarating po ako sa ibang bahagi ng mundo dahil sa ganito ako. So, but imagine that's how our fellows are thinking. That's one. Another example, right, of the problematic aspects of our culture na wala ka makarating na ganyan ka. But mabuti na lang, matigas ang ulo ko. It's a good thing that I'm stubborn and hard-headed. That I didn't have to believe them. I just believe that all I need to do is to believe in what I can do. And the great things that I can still do. If I believed in them, I will be unhappy. If I pretended to not be transgender, pretended to be a cisgender straight man, right, to please them, I may not even reach the age of 40 because I may have committed suicide already because of being unhappy, right? So, you can actually be true to yourself, fight, get that education, fight for it. Like, I fought for my education because we couldn't afford it, so it's a scholarship. Every semester, I have to maintain an average so that I can sustain my scholarship. But that was good stress for me. So when I was studying, when I was younger, I was so happy studying. When I carried those books, I don't look at it as heavy. I was so happy I was carrying the books. I borrowed from the library. So you see, it's the way that we flip scripts in our heads, right? And when our society keeps giving us scripts that we follow that is not going to be healthy for everyone, look at where we are. So there are scripts in our heads that we must flip, right? Like, if you have this diagnosis, then you have to be objective in your thinking. What do I do now? You have this diagnosis. So you cry first, right? You cry. Look for a friend. Cry with a friend. And then after that, now, you have to look for the very objective steps forward. Because you have to manage this diagnosis. So your doctor will walk you through. The oncologist or the specialist will probably walk you through. How do you manage maybe a second opinion and a third opinion? Then what are the medicines, right? The decisions towards a chemotherapy or not, right? The decisions towards a radiotherapy or not, etc. And then, one of the absent factors, because we couldn't afford it, is we also need psychological support. So sometimes we need psychotherapy in the process because we cannot always handle the pain. Because it's a road of uncertainty. But then you also have to look at cancer survivors and people living with cancer that they have lived 6, 10, and even more than 10 years with cancer, because that can be a journey. And people are, let's move away from cancer and look at HIV and AIDS. Remember how many years ago people in the Philippines are afraid of AIDS, that you cannot touch them. Huh? But you don't go near them. You can say that during the time of COVID that you cannot just talk without a mask or talk to someone without a mask as well, because COVID is transmittable. But HIV is not transmittable that way. You can touch someone. You can even have sex in some ways, right? Protected sex, right? But that's the stigma that our society created out of lack of knowledge. We are afraid of what we do not know. So what you don't know, you also have to know. And you have to look for the right sources, not the fake news sources, right? Right? So there are like people who are living with HIV have been around for, I have friends who are like 20 years living with HIV. Because because if you got diagnosed at an early stage, then you will not likely get to AIDS. The first knowledge that we need to know is HIV is different from AIDS. HIV is the virus. And AIDS is that syndrome that has already advanced to that if you didn't actually take care of yourself. People don't die of AIDS automatically. They die of the complications because it's a syndrome. You may die of the pneumonia complications, meningitis complications, tuberculosis complications, right? But how do you also manage the stress, right? So there are coping ways for that, and sometimes you don't know. And even if I talk about this, even for 10 days, you will still not master it, right? So that's why there are basics that we can master. But we also need expertise out there. So we need, like what we spoke about, we have to look into hiring uh, local, Filipinos, Indonesian psychotherapists from the Philippines, right? To work here in Hong Kong eventually, so that they can be among those experts because they understand the culture very well, right? That's one possibility. So later, prolonged, yes. Short-term gain, long-term gain. Yeah, I think I covered that in the example. Worsening of initial symptoms. Because if you already have the, let's just say, it's an good thing, right? You have cancer
Hello.
diagnosis. Your psychological distress will actually just exacerbate, palalalain lang yan, yung symptoms
Naka-live
mo.
ako.
Your stress, people don't
Maya-maya.
believe that stress can kill. But actually it can. If you look at the long roadmap, people who are for a long period of stress, the way they cope with stress are actually very unhealthy processes. Like stress eating on a daily basis.
True.
And people are thinking that just doing this, I'm exercising. Are you sure that that's really going to work, right? So sometimes you have to get on a gym. Like, for example, I just started doing the gym this year as well, and there are mistakes that I've made. Like when I thought that doing a 40-minute cardio is good already. Well, without realizing that you need cardio, but you need strength, you need muscles. So you need to do strength training, right? And then you don't lift as much as someone else is lifting because your strength at that point is different from someone else. So and you it's like some sort of stress for someone also to be pressured with the move of someone like on the treadmill. Someone is already running like this, right? If you look at the machine can go like 6, 7, 8, 9, in the speed. And you're on the 6, it's very fast for you, but someone's doing a 10. They do 10, don't do 10. You have to find your level of intensity. Right? But the way we are thinking, right? Even with fellow sisters of mine, my fellow transgender sisters in the Philippines, many years ago, I was a victim of that thinking as well. That we thought, in order for us to feminize faster, we have to take more hormones, female hormones. So we would take 3 to 7 tablets in a day. We were younger. We were in our 20s. There was no internet, and we were just learning from each other. False information. So after like doing that for about 1 year, we realized, okay, there are some changes, but there are limitations to the changes. Like for example, the breast size. The breast grew, but it was like, let's say, cap A. It could not get to a cap C. So how does it get to a cup C? We need to have the surgery. I had my surgery eventually so that I can get that size that I want for myself. But that thinking is problematic because not only will you not achieve your idealized version of yourself, but it's actually damaging your body. Because you take hormones, that is being metabolized by the kidneys and the liver. So the kidneys and the liver are metabolic sites. Even like, paracetamol. You cannot just take paracetamol automatically. In fact, to me, if I'm feeling the symptoms of flu and fever, I avoid paracetamol. I try to heal because the body can heal itself. And it's your body's way of fighting. That process when you're feeling all of the symptoms, your body is fighting there. And of course, it's different now. It becomes bacterial. That's why the doctor comes in to provide that expertise. If you have the symptoms of bacterial infection, the doctor will have to decide for you. You cannot never ever take an antibiotics on your own. If you take antibiotics, you cannot also stop it. You have to let it run its complete course. If it's 7 days, 21 days, you have to complete that. The problem with antibiotics is if you take it now, and if you need to take because you have another bacterial infection in 3 months, the antibiotics may not work 3 months later. Because your body will be resistant already. So there's a cycle to it. You see, the way that we are avoiding legitimate information, because we're excusing ourselves, we cannot afford it. And so that's also why, if you look at solving problems on a deeper cultural level, we have to influence our communities in the Philippines to strengthen their health programs. The public health system should work for the poor Filipinos, right? So if their experts are there, our relatives, our family can go there for free or very minor cost, and then they can have the expertise that they need with the language that cuts across, right? They can explain. So it's not just us solving a problem. Actually, it's our society that we should hold accountable to, right? Ayan. Thank you so much. Yeah, so if you look at all of these in this Venn diagram, it's a Venn diagram. So one circle will influence another. All of these circles, the biological, psychological, and social circles, they will influence one another, right? So your body is experiencing the symptoms of an illness, let's just say. But the symptoms are going to be added, are going to be worsened by your psychosocial experience as well, the stressors that come your way. So you have to think that if you have this diagnosis of, let's say, it's a lump in the breast. So now, the lump is there. The lump is not all over the body yet. So you try to work that out first. So if you don't know what to do, you have a friend that doesn't know what to do. That's the reason why we also have to identify people in our community who may know what to do. And that should be a very basic information that please ask your employer to help you book a doctor, a specialist, because you have a lump here.
Yes.
Hopefully our employers are also on that spectrum of
Like my
helping.
boss did to me.
Did.
Yeah.
Yes. But they should. And that's also, I think, one of the goals of the community is to ensure that the Hong Kong
Thank you for
employers,
staying.
that the Hong Kong employers,
It's
that the
okay.
Hong Kong employers should feel the urgency. There's an urgency. They should feel that your helpers, you're never slaves. You didn't sign up to be a slave of someone, but the culture of slavery is still present up until now. So you have to draw the line. So you have to work hard in educating the Hong Kong government, in understanding that your employers should also develop an empathy towards their workers, that if you feel ill, you feel an urgent symptom has to be addressed, they should feel the urgency as well. Not only should you be given the day off that's needed, they should actually try to help you, or at least bring you to the consulate. Can you please help me? Help her be assisted, so that I will pay this end, and what else should we need, right? Yeah. So these conversations, and hopefully this group can probably help create like a roadmap to helping you, the Filipino and the migrant workers in general, reaching out also even to the Indonesian migrant workers, etc., the Bali migrant workers, and what should the Hong Kong governments do so that they can educate the employers, right, on the sense of urgency, because the hospital authority, this is a reality that we that we learned the hard way. When you go to the doctors, you just need to be very objective and clear with your problem. They're not going to give you psychotherapy. They don't have the patience. You have to think that sometimes their consultations are only good for a maximum of 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the hour of waiting, 2 hours before your name be called.
2 hours of waiting.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people to get to the specialist, they wait for several months, even 7 months, in the or years.
Yes.
Right.
Public hospital.
And you know how expensive the private ones cost, right? It's very expensive. And the way that they talk here is that it's like you are going to be forced to do something, to take something. You take this, you take this. But then the thing is, you have to have the chance to actually think about what you can do. Like I also my specialist in my endocrinologist was somehow already I think more than suggesting that I have to get an injection. The injection is supposed to curb my appetite so that I will not have like a sweet craving. But I said, but I'm capable of psychologically controlling myself. So when she placed me on the intermittent fasting, and then I asked her, is it possible for me not to do 16 hours every day? And she said yes. So you see, having that kind of assertiveness in that conversation, you would realize you're not forced to do 16 hours on a daily basis. It will not be a perfect fasting, but the principle of fasting is there. The window of fasting, right? Because you need to manage because your body has to fast for a period of time so that it can metabolize the sugar and the fat, right? Because maybe you are insulin resistant already. You have to understand that. You engage the conversations with the doctor. So if it is, let's say, a cancer-related diagnosis, let's say breast or ovarian or cervical, then this needs even more conversations. And then this means that you need help in drilling down the language of your condition to something that's so understandable to us. This is not an insult to us that we don't understand. English is supposed to be our second language. But just because we can understand and speak in English doesn't mean that the language of this medical condition is very easy for us to absorb. There is this psychological veil that seems to cover, that stress once you are going through the conversations of a diagnosis. Because part of you, without understanding it, is denying that, oh my God, I'm actually hearing things that may threaten my life. Right? So you have to get past that. So that's why you have to train your mind as early as now, with the simple stressors in day-to-day life, like COVID, employment situations here, social cultural realities in the Philippines, right? Asthma if you also have diabetes or pre-diabetes. If you're learning how to manage these conditions all at once, then hopefully, not that you're not looking forward to cancer, right? But when cancer diagnosis happens, you're stronger, you're better because you're now trained. Your mind is prepared for it. Because there are also some philosophical aspects about illnesses that we have to be prepared for. Like for example, cancer. Once cancer is there, it's not magically going to go away. And like culturally, we were trained into thinking that praying hard, pray ka lang. Our society trained us that way. Like I didn't get here in Hong Kong because of prayers. I believe in God. I pray. In fact, I will pray later. But I got here in Hong Kong because I worked for a degree. When I heard about a job opening, and and I have to start as a teaching assistant, I said yes right away. I didn't pray so that my POEA requirements will be completed in a week. I worked hard on my POEE requirements on a day-to-day basis. And I converted the stress of doing my papers into stress, good stress. Because, I'm going to have an overseas job. You get what I mean? So, we pray. In fact, for us, you were trained who were raised as Christians or as Muslims. One of the things that we have to remember is you pray for forgiveness and you pray to give thanks and to praise. But not to always ask for help and a miracle. Because those will not happen. So you have to be objective thinking. Like you want to get to Hong Kong, you have to be objectively working towards that goal. Even when you're on the plane, when my first plane ride was actually my flight to Hong Kong 10 years ago. And I was scared as hell, I had this flight anxiety. And I was praying, but I realized you're already up there, So you just have to be objective, that even in the times of turbulence, there is a science towards flight. And you will not see God in the clouds. That, di ka babagsak, you're not gonna fall, I have your back, meaning your plane. No, it doesn't work that way. So, in the end, what I realized was I had to work on my own training, of being trained in psychology, that I have to actually find that kind of relaxation state, which I will talk about. So, some of the common symptoms of stress. Psychological, behavioral. Yeah, so the changes in your behavior, the way you talk more, or you're not talking, or you're moody. Yeah.
Alcohol.
Diba? Moodiness. You know,
High
yeah.
temper.
Mood swings. Now, take note also the increase in heart rate and blood pressure. This is very important to note because it seemed that for us as people in the Philippines, we have a lot of hypertension cases. Many of us Filipinos have hypertension, right? And we don't even know it. You don't wait for the symptoms of hypertension. You have to be proactive already. So maybe you begin by going to the doctor again. The specialist to go to is a cardiologist, right? So unfortunately here in Hong Kong, that's very expensive. So then I guess you have to figure out if there are, I'm sorry, I don't know about this, but are there medical missions on a yearly basis?
No.
Yeah, then maybe that's something to ask for. And who do you ask? You ask for the consulate, the Philippine consulate. You know?
No. Normally, other organizations do for the
Right.
NGO always.
Okay. Because,
Blood pressure test.
yes, yes.
The
We're doing-
organizations did it.
We're doing that. We
Yeah.
get free,
Sugar.
and then sugar testing.
Yeah, FBS, yes. Well, you know what? Speaking of sugar testing, the accurate one is the HbA1c. HbA1c is the 3-month sugar. So you need that. That's a more expensive test compared to FBS.
Yeah.
But FBS is not accurate. Your sugar yesterday, today may be okay, but for the last 3 months may not be. So you need to have the more accurate test,
Yeah,
right?
because I'm pre-diabetic. I'm doing that.
Right? And then for hypertension, when you measure your blood pressure, it's always problematic because one of the triggers of a higher blood pressure also is anxiety.
Yes.
The anticipation of your blood pressure. Yeah, you see, I am speaking from experience also. Yeah. My parents also died of hypertension.
Oh,
And
sorry.
yes, and so that's why these are the things I wasn't aware about. So like it's a trigger, right? And then I realized that I was also doing things for myself. Like for example, I had to undergo cardiological tests for my surgery so that I can get my breast surgery. I realized that I was getting more stressed before doing the test. Like a blood pressure test is always higher for me. It's different. I realized that it was different when I was going to the gym, because I thought that there was no pressure, and that I have to make sure that my blood pressure is normal, or at least it's not scary levels before I start doing something. And ideally, after you're done with the gym, you've rested already, it should already be very normal also. So you don't know about these things unless you hear it. So you have to, it's like putting the information there, right? Like for example, your